Tough to put Austin Simmons in the first tier of SEC quarterbacks as of this moment, but does he at least make the second tier? Let's list them right now.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hail, you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, coming to you today with a quarterback that has a very famous name and is one you're going to want to watch in the high school ranks, I think, for at least the next year or so if you're a Missouri fan. Also, just speaking of quarterbacks, just going to take a deep dive here into the SEC quarterbacks list here. Where does exactly Austin Simmons rank in all of this? So let's just get into it, shall we? Frankly, let's just bring up my top tier SEC quarterbacks. I've got Trinidad Chambliss at the top of the list. To me, that's really not up for debate. I don't really want to hear anybody other than Chambliss as number one at the moment. After the run he went on last season, I think he deserves the top spot. Now, where I think a lot of my colleagues are going to argue with me is maybe not having Gunner Stockton of Georgia second. Instead, I have Arch Manning of Texas second, and then actually LaNorris Sellers of South Carolina third. And that may seem like some disrespect to Gunner Stockton. I'll be honest with you, I as much as I absolutely respect Gunner Stockton's toughness, he is absolutely one of the toughest players I've seen in the conference at that position in a long time. I just think that because of the structure that he has around him at Georgia, what they ask him to do, I have those other players ahead of him, just subjectively speaking. I could be completely wrong there. And I'm projecting forward with LaNorris Sellers there a little bit. I'm a huge fan of his talent. I saw what he did to Missouri in particular in 2024. But, I just think with a new offensive coordinator this season, I think you're going to see the best out of LaNorris Sellers. John Mateer of Oklahoma could be higher on this list by the end of the season, or he could be quite a bit lower, too. If he gets hurt again and really is ineffective like he mostly was the second half of the season, listen, I'm, a fan of his toughness and ability, too. He's got a wide range of outcomes, and so does Marcel Reed in some ways. I think we know who Marcel Reed is as a player for Texas A&M, and yet without the solidity of last year's offensive line, last year's receiver core, I just want to see what Reed can do. And yet you'll notice all six of these guys here: Trinidad Chambliss, Arch Manning, LaNorris Sellers, Gunner Stockton, John Mateer, and Marcel Reed all have one thing in common. They're returning starters with their current team. So to me, I just, that level of experience and proven ability, that gets you into my top six and tier in the SEC. So let's move on to the second tier. Now, my second tier of SEC quarterbacks, well, these are all newcomers, but they are guys who have started at other power programs to one extent or another. I guess USF in Byron Brown's case is not a power program. But we'll start off with Sam Leavitt of LSU, who played for Arizona State last season, had his season cut short because of a foot injury, what is now being called a Liz Frank injury. And that's a concerning one. It really is. There's a fairly wide range of outcomes with Liz Frank, but that was one of those things that late in Cam Newton's career, for instance, around 2019, 2020, he suffered that injury and simply was never the same type of player. So the thing here with Sam Leavitt is, and this is something that kept him out all of spring practice, I think he's been limited in the fall so far. I just want to see it. If Sam Leavitt can be back to 100% what he was at Arizona State, it's quite possible that Lane Kiffin takes Leavitt to another level and LSU is immediately really, really good. That's certainly possible. I'm not willing to bet on it 100% at this point. Sort of the same thing with Byron Brown. Of course, he's coming with Alex Golesh from USF, now with the Florida Gators. sort of like John Mateer bringing his offensive coordinator with him to Oklahoma last season from Washington State. That's probably a good move. You just think, hey, the continuity there, quarterback and coach, I tend to think that is going to yield some dividends. And I just have to put those two in particular, while still in the same tier as Austin Simmons. I think they both have to be ahead of Austin because, simply put, they've proven more as starters than Simmons has. Simmons has just had a really small sample size. Some of it's been good, some of it not so good, quite frankly. So I just think, though, the upside there is hefty enough, especially compared to, well, who I'm going to bring up in the rest of this list, that Simmons actually does belong here in tier 3, or maybe you could argue almost he should be in tier 3 all by himself, but he certainly doesn't belong in this next tier of quarterbacks, in my opinion. And speaking of experience or a lack thereof, this is really all about what the third tier of quarterbacks is about here in the SEC. You've got Keelan Russell or Austin Mack at Alabama. Of course, Austin Mack's been around for a while, just not a ton of game action for him. Keelan Russell, the young player, the 5-star recruit, the guy that I think probably every Alabama fan wants to win the job. How good will he be? Again, who the heck knows? Those 5-star rankings are impressive. You got to see it on the field, though. A similar vibe, I would say, with Kenny Minchey. I recently mentioned that John Mateer of Oklahoma, I think, has a really wide range of outcomes. To me, Minchey of Kentucky, formerly of Notre Dame, has an extremely wide range as well, because what Notre Dame asked Kenny Minchey to do in his limited action, mostly in mop-up duty, that type of deal, well, they asked him to run the football and throw short passes, and what he did was very impressive. I just don't know that how much I can project that forward. So if Kenny Minchey is the real deal, well, you know, the Wildcats could really surprise some people this year. And similarly, you could say the same thing with Camario Taylor, who's a heck of a physical talent as well, somewhat in the mold of the aforementioned Cam Newton, just in terms of his body type and rushing ability. Again, if he cashes in, if he's the best version of himself that others, that recruiters, scouts think he can be, the ones who are most positive on Taylor of Mississippi State, again, that could take them a long ways as well. And Jared Curtis at Vanderbilt, one of the top high school players in the entire country, looks like he's going to start as a true freshman for the Commodores. Despite that, I'm more bullish on Vanderbilt than most, simply put, because I think Clark Lee, their head coach, is truly the secret sauce of that program. Not to discredit Diego Pavia entirely, of course. I just think it's much more about Clark Lee, and people shouldn't completely panic on the Commodores this season. And then finally, to round out this tier, George McIntyre and Faison Brandon of Tennessee. Listen, I think Josh Heupel can get an offense out of just about any quarterback. It's just hard to know, again, with guys who have such little experience. Faison Brandon, a pretty good high school recruit in his own right. You just wonder. I just don't think any of those players deserve to be up into the second or certainly the first tier. No question about that. And finally, to round out the list, we have Aaron Philo of Florida and KJ Jackson of Arkansas. You know, to be brutally honest, I'm just not very bullish on these two teams with rookie head coaches this season in the conference. So, you know, these two guys are just coming up the rear mostly because of that reason. Again, I don't want to be overly simplistic there, but that really is the crux of my analysis. And coming up on the program, I do want to actually take a look at some prominent lists from last season to give us an idea of just how volatile this particular position can be in the conference, coming up on the show in just a minute. First, though, I got to tell you, since 1986, the game has been creating classic college hats that fans are proud to wear, whether you're an alumnus, current student, season ticket holder, or just somebody who never misses a game. A great college hat like this one or this one, quite frankly, is more than just apparel. It's a way to represent your school wherever you go. This year, the game is celebrating its 40th anniversary by giving fans a chance to save on some of their most iconic college hats. If you've been thinking about replacing an old favorite, maybe like this guy, with maybe a newer one like this guy, well, now's the perfect time to add on to your collection, because to me, these babies just not only look good, great material, their snapbacks actually fit you if you have a relatively large head like myself. Again, I'm like a 7 5/8, 7 3/4 in a fitted. These things fit great, and I don't have to go to the actual last snap on the snapback. Big fan of the game, and with hundreds of officially licensed college hats to choose from, you'll find the perfect fit for game day and every day. Don't miss this chance to celebrate 40 years of the game with 40% off your entire order. Visit thegamecaps.com and use promo code Locked On at checkout. That is thegamecaps.com, promo code Locked On. Celebrate 40 years of the game with 40% off. But don't wait. This anniversary offer won't last forever. So certainly while I pointed out guys like John Mateer, guys like Camario Taylor, Kenny Minchie have a really wide range of outcomes for this coming season, well, you got to say the same thing about Austin Simmons as well. So I think I've done a nice job of riding that fence this offseason here so far, though I did think it was interesting to maybe go back and look at, well, at least somebody's list of the SEC quarterbacks from the previous offseason. And how about Josh Pate? There's a guy, if you're listening to a college football podcast, you've probably heard of Mr. Pate before, and I certainly respect his opinions on all things college football. But you go back and look at his list from last season, and holy moly, DJ Lagway, number 1 overall. Well, Lagway now with the Baylor Bears, and got his coach at Florida fired last season for all intents and purposes. So, again, we get a lot of stuff wrong every once in a while, even on this program as well. DJ Lagway, number 1. That's a tough one. Again, just shows, well, the absolute, just volatility of these type of lists. By the way, Arch Manning, LaNorris Sellers, 2 and 3. Hey, that looks pretty similar to my list this year, so I'm not the only one who's a fan of LaNorris Sellers. I got to say, last year, I was definitely a Garrett Nussmeier skeptic, and you notice Austin Simmons coming in at number 6 last year, so, Pate was very high on Simmons coming into the year as well. Diego Pavia, interestingly, only number 10 on said list. But mainly the reason I wanted to show you that really quickly is that, I thought my colleague over at Locked On Sooners had a really good point. We were talking a lot about quarterbacks this morning, and he said what I think the last few years in the SEC has shown us is that it's really hard to be good or great at the quarterback position in your first year in the conference. He says that's my only hesitation with Byron Brown, for example, having to make that jump from USF to the SEC. He also continues, hey, Trinidad did it, but that feels like more than the exception than the rule. A lot has to be right around you. Coaching, play calling, personnel, everything around you matters so much. And indeed, context is just utterly important for the quarterback position. That is why, maybe fairly or unfairly, I'm docking Gunner Stockton of Georgia a little bit. Again, whether I'm right or wrong, I am trying to add some context to all of this good stuff. And I will say, to his point, to Mr. Williams' point there, when it comes to Austin Simmons, at least there's a little bit of experience in the SEC. It's not going to be a brand new scenario here. In fact, even back in 2024, when Jackson Dart was hurt early in that ball game against Georgia, well, Austin Simmons came off the bench for a drive in a real pressure situation and helped lead the Rebels into the end zone for a touchdown on that drive before Jackson Dart came in and finished the game and the victory for Ole Miss in the ball game, by the way. So, Simmons has been put into pressure situations before. He had basically an entire SEC start against Kentucky last season. Listen, not a lot of experience here, but still more than, frankly, what Bo Prabula had. And the deal is, I agree that we'll probably, with the premise that, hey, we'll probably see the best version of Austin Simmons likely in 2027, when he's had more of his feet wet, more experience as a starter in this conference with Missouri specifically, by the way. But a lot of my bullish take on Missouri, and specifically the offense, it's relative, right? Whether Austin Simmons does not have to be a top 5 quarterback in the SEC for Missouri to be better this season offensively. He's just got to be better than what Bo Prabula and Matt Zollers and the entire Missouri passing attack gave the Tigers in the second half of the season. If we're significantly better than that, then the Tigers are going to be significantly better offensively. That's just all there is to it. And those of you who weighed in the comment sections, yesterday I tried to guess the lines for each Mizzou football game of 2026. This was as of today, by the way, not really trying to predict what the line is actually going to be in October or November, for example. And for the most part, the commenters seem to think I was pretty on the money. Maybe a couple of slight disagreements. Most strongly, I think, with the Texas A&M line, I had the Aggies getting nearly a touchdown and an extra point, plus 6.5. I had some listeners say, I think it'd be closer to maybe 3 or 4, something like that. And the more I looked at it, I think they're right. I think especially just based on the projections, Mizzou being at home for that particular game, I think they're probably right. I think if that line came out right now, it may be close to the sort of that 3, 4, 5 range than a full 6.5. So I actually would agree with that particular correction. Now, to the people who said I have Ole Miss giving Missouri 7 points on the road in Oxford, some thought it would be closer to maybe 10 points, something like that. And certainly since Ole Miss was in the Final Four of the CFP last year, Trinidad Chambliss returning, I get that instinct. I'm simply basing most of this on the projections, and the projections just simply don't like Ole Miss as much as you might think based on their college football playoff run last season. Whether that's right or not, we can have that debate. I just know that more often than not, the projections tend to win the day on that type of analysis, especially at this point. So I don't think I'm going to move too far off of my Ole Miss Missouri line with the Tigers getting 7 points, at least not as of right now. And I have to say this, my Luther Burden III take on yesterday's program was mostly about his fantasy value. I know a ton of you, of course, who listen to this program also play fantasy football as well. And right now, Luther Burden III is going as high as maybe the 4th round of, say, like 12-team fantasy drafts. And for me, that's just way, way, way too high. Mike Clay of ESPN came on and said he just thought that was way too high. And I think he's right. But here's the deal. Value is always relative in fantasy football. Maybe over the next few weeks, with now everybody knows Burden's going to be out for the preseason at least with a groin injury here. Maybe that injury actually makes him more draftable. If he slides down to the 7th or 8th round, well, now all of a sudden I'm more interested. See, it's always a moving target. There have been many years in fantasy where I went into a draft thinking, I'm not going to take this guy. But then suddenly he's available at a price that I didn't think, would have never imagined was possible. Well, then, yeah, at this point it's worth it. I'll take the shot. Again, always a moving target. Value is always relative. And coming up on the program, let's talk about Lane Kiffin's son, who very well could be a Missouri quarterback someday. So stick with me on this one, folks. But first, you know what? I got to tell you, baseball fans, if you think you know who's going to hit a home run today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think is going to hit a homer in their next game. If you're right, You'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers, another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on the entire league. Every game certainly has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before the first pitch. I'll tell you who I like today. I'm going Junior Caminero with Tampa Bay. Projected to be one of the highest scoring games of the day against the A's in Sacramento. One of the best power hitters in the league. To me, again, give me Junior Caminero of the Tampa Bay Rays. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of MLB. And while, of course, Lane Kiffin is gearing up for his first season at LSU as we speak, his son, Knox Kiffin, is gearing up to be the quarterback of University Lab in Baton Rouge this season for his junior year of high school. Knox, part of the class of 2028. And so far, Missouri, who has offered Knox a scholarship, is arguably the biggest name school out there that has offered Knox. Now, there are 5 high majors that have offered Knox, including Vanderbilt, Washington, Georgia Tech, and Cal. Now, okay, if you want to argue Washington maybe a bigger school than Missouri, I'll give you that one. They were in the national championship game fairly recently. But I will say Washington a long, long ways away from the South, where Knox has spent, well, basically his entire life here. Spent his sophomore year in playing high school ball in Oxford, and obviously the last few years in that area. I believe Knox, by the way, he was born in Knoxville while Lane was the coach of Tennessee as well. So you do wonder about the regional questions there. You also wonder if Knox wants to play for his dad or not, to be honest with you. We do know that Lane and Eli get along, so if he was going to go somewhere else, Eli Drinkwitz could certainly make a lot of sense. It could be the right fit at the right time for Missouri as well, because Knox is obviously not at the upper echelon with that offer list. He's not a 4 or 5 star type of recruit at this point, though this junior season going to be really important for Kiffin and his recruitment. If he balls out his junior year and proves that, well, he's an even better prospect than what people were suspecting at this point, then maybe offers from the likes of LSU, Alabama, Georgia, those type of schools may be forthcoming. We shall see. I'm just saying, with Austin Simmons around for a while, with Matt Zollers potentially around for quite a bit longer than that, hopefully he sounds like he wants to stay here and develop. Maybe Knox Kiffin is the right type of quarterback for Missouri to get, because each and every year, as I've pointed out, even people have been talking about this in the industry, even schools like Ohio State and the aforementioned Alabamas and Georgias of the world, even they cannot afford to take a 4 or 5 star quarterback every single high school class anymore. In the past, they could, because all it cost them was a scholarship. But now there's a real trade-off there. If I have a quarterback in the fold, do I need another high school quarterback, or do I need another pass rusher? Well, in the immediate sense, clearly you probably need the pass rusher or the tackle or the corner or whatever it might be. I'm just saying, I think there could be a real fit here between Knox Kiffin and Missouri. He's going to be one to watch here, his junior season of high school football. That's pretty much going to be the season that's going to decide his future. By the time he's a senior, almost certainly Knox Kiffin will decide where he's going to go. So several other quarterbacks in the 28 class on the Missouri radar as well. But, Obviously, just with the name Kiffin alone, that's going to attract a lot of attention. But beyond that, I just think this could really be a fit here between Kiffin and Missouri. He's one to watch this fall. And certainly Locked On Mizzou is the podcast to continue to watch this fall throughout the Mizzou football season. Appreciate you doing so as always. And of course, hey, when basketball comes up, going to be diving into that as well with an exciting Missouri basketball season on not too far in the distant future, to be honest with you. So with all that being said, thanks for joining me as always. I'll see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Mizzou.